Biden speaks with China's Xi as tension grows over Taiwan. CNN. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping held a lengthy and candid discussion about Taiwan on Thursday as tensions mount between Washington and Beijing, despite Biden's one-time hope of stabilizing the world's most important country-to-country relationship. The two leaders did agree to begin arrangements for the face-to-face summit, their first as she resist travel amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and certain areas of cooperation, including climate change, were hashed out. But the Taiwan issue proved among the most contentious. The issue has emerged as the serious point of conflict as U.S. officials fear a more imminent Chinese move on the self-governing island as a potential visit by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi prompted warnings from Beijing and a concerted effort by the Biden administration to prevent tensions from spiraling out of control. The matter was discussed at length in the 2 hour and 17-minute phone call Thursday. She offered an ominous warning to Biden, according to China's version of the event. Public opinion shall not be violated, and if you play with the fire, you got burned. I hope the US side can see this clearly, he told Biden, according to China's state news agency. The official English translation later provided by the Chinese Foreign Ministry said, "Those who play with the fire will perish by it." The White House's account of the call was less specific. On Taiwan, President Biden underscored that the United States policy has not changed and that the United States strongly opposed the unilateral effort to change the status quo or undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, a U.S. readout read. A senior U.S. administration official called the Taiwan discussion direct and honest but downplayed Xi's warning, suggesting it was standard for the Chinese leader to warn about the risk of playing with fire. The, the phone call was Biden and Xi's fifth conversation since February 2021. Ahead of time, U.S. officials said a range of topics from tensions surrounding Taiwan to economic competition to the war in Ukraine were likely to arise. But hopes for substantially improving ties with Beijing are low. Instead, Biden's eyes hope maintaining a personal connection with Xi can, and must, avoid the miscalculation that might lead to confrontation. This is the kind of relationship tending that President Biden believes strongly in doing, even with nations in which you might have significant differences. Communications coordinator for the National Security Council, John Kirby, said this week. As Thursday's call was concluding, the two leaders made note of how much work they had created for their teams, including arranging the possible in person meeting. They have yet to meet face to face as a potential counterpart. Opportunity for the summit could arise in November when a series of summits will occur in Asia, including the Group of 20 in Bali, Indonesia, and the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation in Bangkok, Thailand. People familiar with the matter said U.S. officials are looking to arrange such a meeting on the emergence of the one of the summit. Planning for Biden's phone call with Xi predated the furor over Pelosi's proposed visit to Taipei. Neither side revealed whether Pelosi's plans were discussed specifically. Biden is also currently weighing whether to lift some Trump-era tariffs on China in a bid to ease inflation. Though White House officials said he hadn't yet made up his mind and suggested ahead of the time the topic wouldn't factor heavily into his conversation with Xi. Instead, it's China's escalating aggression in the region, including over Taiwan and the South China Sea, at the center of the current tensions. US officials fear without open lines of communication, misunderstandings could spiral into unintended conflict. That includes how Beijing responds to Pelosi's potential visit to Taiwan. Administration officials have been working quietly over the past week to convince the White House Speaker of the risk inherent in visiting the self-governing island. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said Wednesday he'd spoken to Pelosi to provide his assessment of the security situation. Pelosi have not made any announcement about her plans for a trip, which haven't been finalized. I never talk about my travel. It's danger to me, she said Wednesday. Yet, even unofficial word that the third in line to the US presidency was considering a visit to Taiwan, prompting an outside response from Beijing, which considers visit by top-ranking American officials a sign of diplomatic relations with the island. If the US insists on taking its own course, the Chinese military will never sit idly by, and it will definitely take strong actions to throw, thwart any external forces interference and separatist schemes for Taiwan independence and resolutely defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Minister of Defense spokesperson Tan Ke-pei said Tuesday in response to questions over Pelosi's reported trip to Taipei. The White House called those comments unnecessary and unhelpful, saying the rhetoric only serves to escalate tensions in a completely unnecessary manner. They also revealed what US officials have said is the misunderstanding by Chinese officials over the significance of Pelosi's potential visit. The officials said China may be confusing Pelosi's visit with the official administration visit since both Xi and Biden are Democrat. Administration officials are concerned that China doesn't separate the Pelosi from Biden much, if at all. That adds pressure to Biden's call with Xi. Officials were circumspect about whether Pelosi's visit to the rise or how much it would factor into the conversation. But China's apparent confusion over the differences between the White House and Congress could inject a level of personnel animus into the talks. Administration officials' concerns over Pelosi's trip are rooted partly in its timing. It will come at a particularly tense moment with the upcoming Chinese Communist Party Congress, during which Xi is expected to seek an unprecedented third term putting pressure on the leadership in Beijing to show strength. Chinese party officials are expected to begin laying the groundwork for that conference in the coming weeks, with China recently reporting its worst economic performance in 2 years. Xi finds himself in the politically sensitive situation ahead of the important meeting. Biden and Xi spent many hours in each other's company when each is his country's vice president, traveling across China and the United States to form a bond. Biden last spoke to Xi in March, when he worked to convince the Chinese leader not to support Russia amid its invasion of Ukraine. Officials have been watching closely how Beijing responds to the invasion, hoping the mostly united Western response, including a withering set of economic sanctions and billions of dollars in arms shipment, proves the illuminate as China considers its actions toward Taiwan. U.S. official believes there is a small risk China would miscalculate in responding to the potential Pelosi visit. Biden administration officials are concerned that China could seek to declare a no-fly zone over Taiwan ahead of the potential visit as the effort to append the trip, potentially raising the tensions at even further in the region. A U.S. official told CNN. That remains the remote possibility, officials said. More likely, they say, is the possibility China steps up flight further into Taiwan's self-declared air defense zone, which could trigger renewed discussions about potential responses from Taiwan and the U.S. The U.S. official added. They did not detail what those potential possible responses would entail. CNN's Artulit Sons and Betsy Klein contributed to this report.